Okay, I'm going to show you how to set up your document to design your business cards, as well as some helpful information when designing them. So the first thing you need to do is you need to open up a new file. We're going to do a custom size of 3.5 inches by 2 inches in height. So width is 3.5, height is 2. Make sure your orientation should be horizontal, and then change your artboards to 2. The next thing I'm going to have you do is under the title it says bleed. I'm going to have you change it to 0.25. So we want a 1/4 inch bleed, and I'll explain what that is in a minute. So when you click create, you're going to have 2 artboards. And if we look at our rulers, which is Control R, you can see that they are 3.5 inches wide and 2 inches tall. So this is the standard size for business cards. So you're going to be creating your business cards within this box. Now this red line here, this is what is called the bleed. Anything designed between the actual artboard and the bleed does not get printed. However, it's important for us to have a bleed because when we are printing on a colored paper other than white, so if we're printing a black background or a blue background or whatever your background may be, it's important that it goes past the edge of the paper, because sometimes when we are printing things in the printing process and the printers trim the cards because they cut them down to size, they may cut a little off, and we don't want to have a white line going around. So by printing a little bit past the edge, then when they trim it, it will actually trim through color, and so you'll have solid color in the background. So the bleed is really a printing thing, and it's not too important when we're designing, but if we were to send these to a printer, it would be important. So it's just a good habit to start. So I'm going to show you guys, a lot of you have been asking, how do we make the background a different color instead of white? It's really simple. You would simply grab the rectangle tool, and you would make a box. Usually we go from bleed to bleed, and then you would fill it with whatever color you want. So some of you may need a black background. Make sure you turn the stroke off. We don't need an outline. Now the downside to having the black background is we can't see where the artboard is. So it could be helpful for when you're designing to make your box the same size as your business card, and then we can always stretch it out a little later. It's not a big deal. So you would just make a box like that. So now we have a black background. It does help when you make a colored background if you lock your layer and then create a new layer, so that way your background doesn't move. Now you have your front with a black background. If we want to do the same thing to the back, I would simply unlock your layer, copy, and then lock your layer again. So now we have front and back with black backgrounds. Another thing that I've seen in some of your guys' designs is you have an image like a paw print or a ribbon or something where it's actually being cut off, and I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So first thing, I brought in this ribbon. I'm going to copy it, go back to, there's my business cards I'm working on. I'm going to bring in my image. Now when you're looking for some images and things like that, make sure when you do your Google search, you always Google search a vector image. That way it doesn't have a background. So this is a little grainy, it's not the best image, but it'll work for this tutorial. So I have this ribbon, and then let's say I want to turn it like this, but I'm going to have it to where it's trimmed off the edges. How we do that, we wouldn't just leave it like this. So how we would actually trim it is we would take our rectangle tool and we would make a box around what we want to show, kind of like a picture frame. Make sure your box is has no fill but has a stroke. So I'm going to change it here. So I have nothing fill on the inside but a black outline, just so I can kind of see that my box is there. Then all you have to do is simply click on your picture, hold down Shift and click on your box. So they're both selected now. Then right click and make a clipping mask. And now you'll see the box has completely disappeared except for the image that's inside of it. So this is called a clipping mask. And clipping masks are really amazing because they actually help you design without destroying. So what that lets you do is, if I double click on here, you'll notice that the ribbon is still there and I can actually move it around. And then if I go back, it's moved, but still within my box. You can also use the direct selection tool and move the ribbon around. But you'll notice however I move it, oops, however I move it, it still gets trimmed. You can also rotate it, hold down Shift, you can make it bigger, and it'll stay in that clipping mask that you made. So I saw some people also were looking at paw prints, so I brought in another vector of a paw print. And I'm going to show you again. So I simply take my rectangle tool, make a box. Let's say I want the paw print to be in the background of the card, but I don't want it to go over the edge. So I made my box and I'm going to make it to where no fill, black outline, using the selection tool. Select both of them, right click, and make a clipping mask. And now, as long as the picture is selected, I can move it around. So I can actually rotate it, make it smaller, and have a paw print. And it stays within the card and then gets trimmed at the edges. Some people were also talking about having their logo in the background, but having it a lot lighter, kind of like a watermark. So how we do that is really easy. You select your image. So I want should be, we just have to change the opacity. Oh, it's right there. Okay, so you should be able to select your image. Once you have your image selected, you see the opacity. If you remember from earlier, opacity is how transparent something is or how solid it is. So if we lower the opacity, you'll notice the ribbon is starting to get more and more see-through. Because it's on a black background, it does start to look a little gray. So I'll show you what it looks like on a white background. So it's very faded and light, which works in this background because then you can put text on there. So if I grab a text box, you'll see how easy it is to still read even though it's in the background. So that's how you create essentially what is called a watermark in the background. And you also have your clipping masks. Make sure when you guys are doing your text that you do outline your fonts after you're done. So once you're completely done, make sure you right click and then go to create outlines for all your text. And that'll also help you with sizing.